I want to talk about three things. I'm from Weaviate, which is a vector database. I know there are tons of vector databases these days, but we think it's the best one. Unbiased opinion. But I want to talk about three things. I want to talk about our integration with model providers. I want to talk about our DX, which we think is really, really good for doing RAG. And the third thing, which is how easy it is to scale Weaviate. So let's get going. So I'm going to just load some data, right? Hopefully you've used pandas before. And what I'm doing is loading some movie data. So there's some movie data here on the way. And I'm just going to go through and connect to Weaviate. So this is the only bit of code. I haven't primed my database. I haven't done anything else. So all I'm going to do is everything you're going to see is running live. So I'm going to connect to Weaviate, which is running in the background. And since that's going, this is a single node instance. So I can, just in case I've created something in the background, I'm going to create a collection of objects. So again, I'm starting with a completely empty database and starting and creating a collection. And I'm doing two things. I'm creating an integration connection with Cohere, so I can create my vector embeddings for my movies. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is I've got Ollama running on my device, so on my laptop. And I'm connecting that to use the Gemma 2 billion model, so I can do generation or RAG. And this is the only bit of code I'm going to use to add my data. So I'm just iterating through my data frame and adding the movies into my data set. It's not a huge data set. It's about 1,500 objects or so. And fingers crossed, and the internet connection willing, this will work in just a few seconds. So one of the things you'll notice here is that it's quite easy. We've paid attention to the developer experience to get started. And if I have a look at how many objects I've got, you might not be able to see that. It's about 2,000 objects. So that's all done. And just like that, I was able to create a data set in Weaviate, ingest data, and I'm performing a RAG query. So what I'm doing is performing a query for intergalactic adventure, just because I wanted to come up with a phrase that's not verbatim, like space or something. And then I'm getting my Gemma model to describe an audience that would like this type of movies. Great, RAG works. I'm sure you've heard the word RAG a billion times in the last 2 days, so I won't explain what RAG is. What happens if we have more data, though? So here I've got another artificial for loop, so I can create just more and more objects. And the point of doing this is that I want this to fail. Now, this isn't a lot of data, but this probably will fail because what I've done is I've created these Kubernetes pods in the background with very little RAM. So actually, what I'm doing is running Weaviate with only about 100, 150 megabytes. I forget what I've set of RAM. So very, very small pods, and it's going to try and ingest all this data, and it's going to fail. And you can see it says, hey, batch has too many errors, exiting, which is a loop that I've added in. So if I have a look at that, I've got about 7,000 objects it got to, and then it just started to stop. And this is very indicative of the typical type of error you'll have when you go to production, right? You have big sizes, and your device fails. So what do? Well, let's connect to a second cluster that I'm running on my device, which has a lot more resources. And I'm going to do the same thing and import data. So I'm going to do two different things here. One is I'm going to explicitly set my vector index, and the second is I'm going to enable vector compression. So if I create a collection and now do the same thing, this will magically work. And depending on how it goes for time, I might just you might take my word for it. But what I'm doing here is creating a larger cluster, right? So here I'm running this on a 6-node cluster on my device. So again, the same very, very small containers with 100 megs of memory or so. And now, because I've run them in a horizontally scaled cluster, using Minikube, using Docker for virtualization, by the way, it will run without any issues. And this is like the kind of thing you would do if you would create a in-production cluster. And what you'll notice in what I've done is that the user experience as a developer is all abstracted away, right? I've created a cluster in the background. Sure, obviously needs to go on some sort of hardware somewhere. But as a user, all I've done is to connect to Weaviate, and it just works. Weaviate just takes care of the horizontal scaling. And then this should take about, this is kind of internet speed dependent, so I have to figure out how much time I want to fill as it's doing that. So the other thing I'll show you once this is done is not just horizontal scaling, but also creating replication. And what I'll do there is, again, just one more line of code. I'm going to add a replication factor, and I'm going to do this on a 12-node cluster, again, on my computer, so that if a node fails, this will continue to work. And there you go. This all just worked. And what you'll see is if I now connect to my 12-node cluster, I'll be done in 30 seconds or so, and ingest data. And I'm going back to my small data set with 1,500 or so objects. And so that should take 15 seconds or so to ingest data. And then when I get through to the query works, right? So same kind of objects. I'm going to delete a node in my cluster right now. So you can see the pod's been deleted. If I look at the pod status, you can see it's rebooting because Kubernetes magic. But my query still continues to work because I've got replication. So the node that's gone down has replicas somewhere else. I'm over my time, so that's it from me. I've got a demo repo here. If you want to take a photo, please do give it a go. My name's JP Hwang. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm around. Please have a chat. I'd love to see it. Cheers.